I've recently revamped my Moog lookalike Eurorack system because I got a second 960 sequential controller at a reasonable price. So one cabinet is now in essence a Moog complement B. So there are two 960 sequencers, two 962 sequential switches, a 961 interface, and a couple of interlopers in the form of a Pico Quant and a 2HP tune, which make life a lot easier. But this left a bit of room at the end of the cabinet, which leads us to the module in question. So, this is the Moog triggered controller. It's a fairly rare module. In fact, as far as I'm aware, only 4 of them were ever made. And it was designed by R.A.Moog in approximately 1969 for the University of New York at Albany CEMS system, which I think is Coordinated Electronic Music System, or Coordinated Electronic Music Studio. Structurally, it's very simple. It's a set-reset flip-flop, which can be set or reset using push buttons on the front panel or via V-trigger inputs, and this outputs to 3 potentiometers which give an output voltage. Also, when it's on, there's a trigger output giving the state and a handy indicator, which on the original would have been an incandescent lamp. On here's a nice LED. So what can we use it for? Well, I'll patch a few bits up and we'll have a play. So I've got a sequence, just very basic sequence, very boring, nothing happening. So if I now patch one of the outputs into CV input to the filter, and we now start things going. When I turn it on, we get a tonal variation, and turn it off, it goes away. Now, if I also patch one of the outputs, if I find my patch lead, to CV input on the VCA of my sound source and start it going again, I can affect the structure of the envelope. Okay, so I'm having to press buttons here. It's getting a bit boring. But I can take the individual trigger outputs from the 960 sequential controller and patch them in to the V-trigger inputs. So now, when we get to a certain step on the sequential controller, the triggered controller will turn on, giving us a tonal and envelope variation, and when it gets to another step, it'll turn off. Now, on the original triggered controller, well, first thing I'll say about the triggered controller is there's no schematic available. I reverse engineered this from pictures on the modularsynthesis.com website. And so it's my best guess. I'm fairly sure of how it works, might be unsure of some of the transistor types. As designed, it looked to be that it was only outputting positive voltages, but the particular example on the modularsynthesis.com website looks to have been modified to output negative voltages. Well, what I've done, I've made each of these 3 output channels configurable so that by a jumper on the back of the PCB you can set them to positive or negative. So on this one, the first output is giving a positive, whereas the second one I've configured at the moment for a negative. So that negative is chopping the envelope slightly short on the VCA. Now on these, I've just taken the outputs direct, so it's a step function, but you could take the outputs via a slew limiter or other processing to give a much more gradual tonal change. Haven't got anything to do that yet, but something to be worked on. Okay, so that's the quite rare Moog triggered controller. Thank you. Okay, and here's a very quick demo with the output of the triggered controller sent through a slew limiter.